think there's some interesting things about the Book of Enoch that need to be talked about. They tell you that this guy was just, a real good guy, and he did everything that God wanted. And so that's the story that you get, but that's not the actual true story. Noah is actually Zeazudra. Enoch is the great-grandfather of the person that was actually given the instructions on how to build a ship to be saved from the flood. Now, this ship that he actually built, we discover, is not a gigantic boat. Zemaziah and Azazel were the two chiefs or leaders of this particular crew of these watchers. And these EGG people are these Anunnaki workers. And the fallen angels impart various types of knowledge and skills that were previously unknown to mankind. Then they started doing something again that was against the prime directive. They started teaching forbidden knowledge, was going to expedite our advancement technologically. And when you advance your technological prowess, all of a sudden, there's room for extreme detriment to that civilization. They praise Enoch for being so holy and so good to God that he was taken away and straight to heaven. He didn't have to die. He went straight into heaven and he never came back. They tell you that this guy was just, a real good guy, and he did everything that God wanted, and he was without sin, and he was so incredible that, hey, just take him straight to heaven. Just bypass the whole death process. Just go ahead and take him to heaven. And so that's the story that you get, but that's not the actual true story. It's quite interesting that Enoch is highly, highly, highly revered in the biblical text. However, his own book was left out of the Bible. Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think Enoch's text was left out of the canonized Bible? Well, I'll tell you why. Because it's talking about these people behind me. That's why. It's an ancient Jewish religious text traditionally ascribed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. Now, who is Noah? We know now, because I've been reading the Epic of Gilgamesh, that Noah is actually Zeazudra, okay? That's his real name, Zeazudra, before it was converted to the name of Noah in more recent texts. His original name is Zeazudra, or even in some, depending on which version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, Akkadian or Babylonian, it could be Unapishtim, okay? Zeazudra is the most commonly known name, but Enoch is the great-grandfather of the person that was actually given the instructions on how to build a ship to be saved from the flood. Now, this ship that he actually built, we discover in the Sumerian tablets, is not a gigantic boat like what they have been preaching to you in Sunday school. He was given the instructions, and how do I know this? Well, the tablet is actually in the British Museum. He was given the instructions on how to build a gigantic round disc submersible, or maybe it flew. I don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows. And it was cut up into sections like a pie on the inside. And he was told to put his local flora and fauna and his local livestock in that disc. He never built a gigantic ship. Not once did he build a ship. That is false information. Not once did two parakeets and two lions and two deer and two cockroaches and two fleas and two ticks and all this come on the boat. Didn't happen, okay? I'm just telling you right now, it did not happen. He was literally told to get his local flora and fauna and his local livestock and take on this disc that was cut up into sections like a pie on the inside, but it was a sealed disc, like a saucer. That's what he was in. And we know this for an absolute fact now. There's no way to get around it. There's absolutely no way to get around it. So Enoch is the great-grandfather. Now, what's important here is we're aligning a man who has directly interacted with these advanced beings. Now we know his own descendant also interacted with these advanced beings, as he was given the actual instructions on how to build this from Ea Enki, one of these Anunnaki people. Enki saved him and his family's life by teaching him how to build this particular disc-shaped floating device, if whatever you want to call it, right? This DNA bank, if maybe it was that. But we see a direct connection between Enoch and Ziusudra, who's actually now called Noah in more modern texts, because the Bible is New Age information, not Old Age, it's New Age. So it's interesting that that connection, that lineage is there. Two people, same bloodline, both being directly engaged by these beings. The descent of the Watchers, they descended from the sky. When we hear this in the biblical text or the Enoch text, what are we being told here? We're being told that these people, and I do mean people, came from the sky down. They descended from the sky down to the earth. And they were called the Watchers. They were the Watchers. They would watch over humanity. And in some ways, they were forbidden to engage humanity. Some of them were forbidden to actually engage. In other words, to directly interact or interfere. It was against the rules. They actually had something called a prime directive, the same kind of prime directive. You see that they utilize that same term in Star Trek. In the Star Trek TV series, since it came out in 1960 all the way till now, they have a prime directive in which they cannot directly engage or interact with any civilization that's pre-warp. If that civilization is pre-warp and they're going to actually go down to the surface of that planet, then they have to pretend like they're part of that culture. They have to pretend like they fit in, like they're not really aliens or from space. And they can't alter or change or give them any technology in any way, shape, or form. It's forbidden, literally forbidden. Well, they got that information from the ancient tablets. And the Watchers descended to Earth because they were attracted to human women. Now, that's not me saying that. That's in the Book of Enoch. That's the ancestors saying this. They were attracted to human women. And this group of angels was led by chiefs such as Zemaziah and Azazel. Zemaziah and Azazel were the two chiefs or leaders of this particular crew of these Watchers. And they decided, you know what? These girls look pretty damn good. We're going to take some human wives. Now, it's interesting that when you read the Enuma Elish or the Epic of Atrahasis, you discover these beings in there. They call them the Igigi. And these Igigi people are these Anunnaki workers. They're not slaves, but they're the working class. In other words, if I own a construction company, I'm the boss. Then I have a master architect, and underneath that, I have a foreman, and then underneath the foreman, I have workers who go out and actually do the labor to build the product or the house. You see, it's a structure, it's a system. Well, these Igigi, they said the same exact thing in the Epic of Atrahasis. They said, we want to get some of these human women. We don't have no women over here. They were working, according to them, they were working on Mars, and they were complaining about the conditions. And they said, you're working us like we're slaves, and we're not slaves. And not to mention, we want to take some of these women back with us. So in two different texts from two different time periods, we find the same story. We found not the same story, but we found a similarity, I should say, a similarity in which these advanced beings, they want to get at these women. And so they began families. Then they started doing something again that was against the prime directive. They started teaching forbidden knowledge. The Book of Enoch says that. They started teaching them forbidden knowledge. And the fallen angels impart various types of knowledge and skills that were previously unknown to mankind, which had a profound and often detrimental impact on human societies. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that these beings violated another law and began to engage mankind and give us the forbidden knowledge. And why was it forbidden? It was forbidden because, why? It was forbidden because this information that they were giving to humans was going to expedite our advancement technologically. And when you advance your technological prowess, all of a sudden, there's room for extreme detriment to that civilization. Why? The reason why it's room for extreme detriment is literally because when you take a civilization that isn't maturing enough spiritually and give them advanced technology, turn them into a technocratic civilization, they can potentially destroy themselves. And that's where we are right now. We're in a situation where we're on a precipice. We're on a line that we can go this way or that way. We're teeter-tottering. We are in a position right now to destroy ourselves. In less than 100 years, we went from a horse, buggy, and carriage to creating intercontinental ballistic missiles to creating the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 craft that have now gone out into interstellar space. We've done incredible things in less than 100 years. What did Azazel begin to teach the humans? He teaches men to make swords. First thing he does, let me teach you how to cut somebody up. Let me teach you how to chop somebody to pieces. We didn't have metallurgy. We didn't know how to make swords and steel. We didn't know how to work metals. We had no idea until Azazel taught us. He taught us how to smoke metal and all that and steel and iron and how to make a sword that won't break and that can slice and dice over and over and over again. Azazel did that. He teaches men how to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. We didn't have anything. It didn't exist yet. Azazel taught us that. One of these Anunnaki people, and I do mean people, person, humanoid. Azazel also teaches women the art of beautification, including the use of makeup and jewelry, which is suggested to have incited further sin. Azazel, that's how we learn how to make weapons. It didn't come from the Japanese and the Chinese, and no, it all came from one source. Azazel is the first person to teach us how to work metals and make swords and knives. First person, and breastplates and shields. First person. Then what happened? Semjaza, he instructs on the enchantments of root cuttings, essentially teaching sorcery and herbalism. So he taught sorcery and herbalism. He taught people how to use the herbs for either curing or for either trying to utilize those herbs in correlation with sorcery to create a particular outcome. A lot of that stuff is still being used today. And we don't want to admit that's what we're doing, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to create sorcery, burning incense, right? Smudging and all of that. That comes from Semjaza. Amaros teaches resolving of enchantments. So he's teaching how to resolve enchantments. And then you have Barakel teaches astrology. So the first time we were taught anything about astrology and how it applies to human behavior, that came from Barakel. Then Kokabel taught the knowledge of constellations. He gave some real knowledge on constellations, star systems, orbital periods, star alignments. All that came from Kokabel. Then you have Ezekiel. He teaches about the knowledge of the clouds and meteorology. So now we're getting information on the clouds, stratus clouds, cirrus clouds, predicting weather patterns, understanding barometric pressure. All of that comes from this guy, Ezekiel. And then you have Arakiel. He teaches about the signs of the earth, which might be interpreted as geology, right? Or geomancy. So he's teaching geology, stones. He's teaching you how to understand layers going down, how many years back in time that goes, how to detect an area where there may be flowing rivers underneath the land, where there may be dangerous argon gases that you don't want to dig there or create something under that area. All these things, tectonic plate movements and volcanic activity, and all this information is coming from this guy, Arakiel. Then you have Shamsiel. He teaches about the signs of the sun, like the solar behavior and the solar cycles. So he's teaching about the solar maximum, the solar minimum, CMEs, coronal mass ejections. He's teaching all this information to the people. So they have a full understanding of the solar minimum, solar maximums, and how that affects global warming and global cooling, how some of these CMEs can literally affect our magnetosphere. Then you have Sariel. He instructs on the course of the moon, which encompasses lunar cycles and possibly lunar astrology. Sariel's teaching this. So the whole lunar cycle, all that's being taught by Sariel. And not only that, but because it's the lunar astrology, he's teaching about the effects of the lunar gravitational forces on human minds, human consciousness, and how it affects our own behaviors. Still to this day right now, I don't know if you knew this, but during the full moon, which is totally predictable, Do you know that police stations ramp up and have more policemen on staff that night? And the emergency room at hospitals have more staff that night on a full moon? Do you know why? Because on full moons, there's going to be more activity with crime and with injuries, either stemming from crime or other, maybe more car accidents, whatever, on the night of full moon. Full moons directly affect human consciousness. So Sariel's teaching and instructing on the moon. And so you have the consequences of all these teachings that these beings did. I don't call them angels because they're not angels in my book. The knowledge imparted by the watchers leads to increased sinfulness and corruption among humanity, according to the Book of Enoch. The text portrays this dissemination of forbidden knowledge as one of the key factors leading to the moral decay and the eventual decision of God to bring about the great flood in the form of a divine retribution. The punishment to the watchers is, as the result of their actions, the watchers are judged by the archangels and are subjected to severe punishments. They are bound and cast into the abyss, a form of imprisonment and torment as a penalty for their disobedience and negative impact on humanity. So the humans got to die in the flood, but these people, they don't die. They just get kind of bound into some kind of a chamber where they can't get out. And they're not killed. They're put into some kind of prison. If you really go into the text, you discover something very interesting, that Enoch wasn't taken by God. He was taken by people. And he wasn't just taken once. He was taken more than once. You're taught in Bible study that he was taken to heaven on a chariot, never to return again. He was taken straight to heaven. He bypassed death, not according to the Book of Enoch, where he actually has a conversation with the beings that are going to take him on this trip to teach him knowledge, which is approved by the head god, Anu. This teaching is approved and this trip is actually approved. And it's given a set day that they're going to leave on this trip. He even gets his affairs in order and has his sons be prepared for the day that he's going to leave. In the Book of Enoch, the narrative of Enoch being taken into the sky or the heavens is one of the key elements of the text. The ascension is portrayed as an extraordinary event where Enoch is granted divine visions and insights, setting the stage for the detailed revelations that follow in the book. In his ascension to heaven, Enoch's ascension is described across several passages in the Book of Enoch. He is taken up into the heavens multiple times, each providing different experiences and revelations. In other words, different things he's being taught, different knowledge that he's been given on different trips. Multiple, not even double, but multiple means more than two. In his initial ascension, Enoch describes how he was taken up into the heavens on the clouds and the wind in the sky bore him aloft. Well, that sounds quite a bit like flying in some type of a vessel. The ascension is often seen in his initial introduction into the celestial realms, and during this time, he visits various places in the heavens and earth, including the places where the heavenly bodies, stars, sun, and moon, are regulated. Oh, he's in outer space, guys. One of the earliest accounts of a planned alien abduction. Visions of the heavens. As Enoch ascends, he is shown the treasures of the stars and the thunder. Among other secretive and sacred places of the heavens, he witnessed the workings of the natural world from a divine perspective. So he's looking at the earth from atop, and he describes it as a giant ball. Understanding the operation of the cosmos, the weather patterns, and other natural phenomena from above, looking down on the planet. He's seeing the clouds from the other side. This isn't a story about some heavenly father, a sky daddy with a magic wand, whisking away a good human into heaven. It's a story of advanced beings with advanced technology that's capable of space travel, taking a man from the earth into space and teaching him things. This is why the Book of Enoch is not in the Bible. Then you have the revelation of secrets. Throughout his heavenly journey, Enoch is also shown secrets that are not known to other humans. He's given forbidden knowledge. These include ultimate judgments of the angels and humans, hidden paths of the stars. He's given star maps and the storehouses of life and rain, which are meant to explain both cosmic and earthly operations from a divine standpoint. He's given the information and knowledge how to predict weather patterns on Earth. That is what the Book of Enoch is all about. That's what the Book of Enoch is all about. You'll find everything I'm talking about is right in this book, the Book of Enoch, one of the most revered people in the biblical text, whose book was omitted by the Council of Nicaea. Why? We don't want to tell them about these aliens taking people into space and teaching them how to kill each other, make weapons and all of this, and how they lusted after our women. No. Let's keep that on the outside. Just keep it on the outside. That's exactly why. People want to believe in fairy tales. There's just no other way. I've come to the understanding now that people want to believe. They want to so badly believe in fairy tales. A lot of people have succumbed to the life on this planet and believe that, this is hell that we're living in, and it's always the end of days, and there's got to be something better, because they haven't figured out how to bring heaven to earth. They haven't figured out how to stop waiting to die so they can live. And because they can't do that, they want to believe in the fairy tales. They want to believe in, this artificial thing that happened, which is this right here. They want to believe in two of every animal of every kind and came onto this ark, and which was a giant boat that was built by a man's hands in dry land, and then the flood came and swept them away, and then 8 people survived, and those 8 people turned into 8 billion. A genetic pool would need to be much bigger than 2 animals of each kind, right? You might be able to get away with it with a couple different, like, earthworms, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
You're not going to get away with creating a whole repopulation of horse by 2 horses. Man. You're not going to create a repopulation of lions from extinction, because this will be an extinction level event, with a lion and a lioness. It's just not going to happen. A giraffe and a giraffe. I mean, 2 giraffes can't make, tens of thousands of giraffes that existed. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way. The opening scene in the Emerald Tablets, Thoth says that the temples were rising up out of the mud, that the fountains had completely covered the land. We're talking about a global flood, and that people who survived in caves are coming out of the caves. Now, what's interesting is the Bible does kind of mimic some of that information, because in the Bible, what people miss, because the Bible study class never teaches you this, and the people who are studying Christianity never read the Bible. They only listen to what somebody tells them about the Bible. So they didn't read the part where it says that people survived in the caves, and that the kings had survived in the caves, and that Nephilim also survived. Not all the Nephilim were wiped out. Some of them survived this. And this is why you have the Nephilim giants, and you have all this population of people that survived after the flood situation happened. That's actually in the Bible, but nobody ever reads the Bible, so they would never actually know this. And if anybody is doubting what I says, just Google Nephilim survived the flood, and you get all the Bible verses right there, right? The Bible verses are right there. It tells you the exact verses in Genesis where you can see that the giants survived the flood, and people survived the flood, and that they hid in caves. And the Emerald Tablets is where they got that information from. It says that they hid in the caves in the desert, and that after the flood waters began to recede, and the temples were coming up out of the mud, the people came out. The giants came out, right? And then you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a huge story. It's taught in universities in ancient civilizations. Like, you can't be an ancient historian without doing a complete paper on the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's a massive story. It's considered an actual poem. And in there is who? Enlil, right? This is a Sumerian Babylonian story. And Enlil is the one that sends Gilgamesh on this hero's journey. And what's interesting about this hero's journey, Gilgamesh didn't want to be alone on this journey through the wilderness that he had to go on. And so Enlil fashioned him an artificial man, a friend to go with him, that he created, literally fashioned him, and imbued him with knowledge and intelligence, which is AI, and sent him along his way with his friend. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, they're on the search for Ziusudra. Ziusudra, or also known as Utnapishtim, is also the biblical Noah. And this story about Noah and the flood was written in the Emerald Tablets 4,400 years before the Bible was even thought of being written. They discovered something amazing. Let me show the people what they discovered They discovered these tablets. Guess what this is? The original tablets with the original instructions for Ziusudra to create an ark. Now, let's talk about this ark that they were told to create and what it is. All right. So the tablets were found. So there was an instruction that was given down to Noah, aka Ziusudra, aka Unapishtim. That's the really, two names between Babylonian and Assyrian. And this information was to create an ark that was in the shape of a disc.
When we was doing some research on the show yesterday, and we came up with was the ark a spacecraft? Could it been a spacecraft? That was it's right here on the bottom right here, and it was number 9 to add. So I got a few questions I was going to ask you, and that was one of them right there. So there we go.
So it's pretty interesting. So it was a disc. Now, of course, mainstream doesn't want to say spacecraft. In my opinion, was a DNA bank. At the least, at the best, it could have been some type of a craft, or at least a DNA bank that also had, the capability of surviving on top of water. But let's take a look at the illustration that they created based on this new development that is official now. It's made it into mainstream peer-reviewed archaeology that this object is the actual ark. Based on these tablets, they are reconstructing the original ark that has been plagiarized into the modern day Bible. And you can see clearly here, you can see the shape, the design. They're following the exact instructions on those tablets that I just showed you, which show that the ark was never built the way that it was talked about in the Bible. That's a fabrication, that the ark was built in a disc shape. And you can see the hypothesis here. The tablet reads this, says this. It gives the instructions from Enki to his son, who was actually half human, half Anunnaki or Atlantean, right? Okay. Enki had made it with a human, and that human gave birth to Ziusudra, or like I said, aka Unapishtim. This person was not normal. If you read the Bible, you'll read about the birth of Noah. And while everyone around was completely dark and black, Noah came out. He came up with bright skin, and he came up with light eyes, which was pretty crazy. He looked nothing like the people around him, and Enki claimed him as his son. Now, here's what's that's in Sumerian. And so here's what's interesting. He gives them these instructions, and he tells them to collect the animals that he has cultured, that he has utilized to aggregate the land and everything else from his local area.
Wow.
He didn't tell him to get two of every kind from all around the planet to put inside this ark and somehow sedate them so they can sleep for come on. He just gathered up stuff that he had around his local surroundings, you know what I'm saying? And he put whatever he could in the ark. And I think, in my opinion, some of it was just genetic pools. He was told to collect, different plant types and things like that from around the area. And most likely, through genetics, we have this now. I mean, people who do farming now, they're master geneticists. They know how to blend genetics of different plants, bring plants back. They can take a stem of a tree or a plant, and they can regrow an entire plant or a tree from that. So they became master geneticists. We're talking about the same type of understanding here. We're talking about the fact that he was just collecting what he had, livestock and so forth, that he had locally close by and right around his area to put into this disc-shaped object, which you can see they were rebuilding there. He wasn't a giant, but he was definitely albino. He was an albino. He was an albino. His eyes were light. His eyebrows were light. His hair was light. His skin was light. It was like a person that was an albino. When you look into some of the accounts of some of the Anunnaki, some were dark, some were like albino, right? They were like mute of colors. That's the term. That's the description. Some were white with red hair. Some looked more Asian. That what we learned, the more I study these Anunnaki people, they had every single race that we have on Earth, which makes sense.
Makes sense.
Because when you read the Emerald Tablets, you discover something interesting. Both, aka Tahuti, he had many names. He came to the land of Kemet in the beginning of the Emerald Tablets with a crew. The crew he brought with him was mixed race people. When they got done rebuilding Kemet after the flood, he sent those people, he said, spread out around the world and duplicate what we did here. When they got to different regions of the planet and duplicated rebuilding civilizations, they put a genetic marker on the people they ruled over, which is why we look like them. Let us make man in our image. I believe that he was in touch with E.T. In other words, these Anunnaki people, these advanced beings, according to the tablets, not according to Billy Carson, according to these tablets, they weren't from Earth. According to the Sumerians, they weren't from Earth. Not according to Billy Carson, not according to me because I want to believe in aliens. I'm talking about, I'm going on what these tablets say. If you understood how hard it was to write in cuneiform on wet clay with a stylus, which is basically a stick with a tip on the end, and how many hours it takes to write thousands of lines, people weren't just sitting around going, you know, I just want to make a space age story about some aliens coming over here. Let me spend my next 3 months, you know, carving into this stone with this stylus so I could tell the story about aliens that came to Earth. Didn't happen. Okay. These people were scribes. And they were writing down stories that were spoken out, and they were writing it down, and they were writing what they saw, what they knew, what existed, and what happened. Life was too hard to be wasting time writing sci-fi stories back then.
Yeah,
you had to worry about what you're going to eat for the day, if you were going to survive an attack from an animal. What can you contribute to your civilization today? You know what I'm saying? Everything was done, work was done by hand. Most of the work was done by hand. There was very little machinery. So you're talking about, even as advanced as they were, they still were busting their butts and tail every single day, having to provide for the community and do work their fair share. Nobody had time to sit around and write sci-fi movies 4,000 years ago. So they wrote what they were told and they wrote what they saw, period, point blank. And so this Zeosidra was interacting directly with, aka Noah, was interacting directly with these beings and was talking back and forth, having a communication, because he talks to the Anunnaki and the Anunnaki talks back to him and gives him actual instructions, which is a tablet that I just showed you, which is sitting in the British Museum where anyone can go and see it right now. This is the books, plural, of Enoch. And what you find is that Enoch was revered and was a high-level entity according to the biblical text, because they mention him and mention his high status, but they don't give you the book that he wrote or the information he left behind for future generations. And the reason why they didn't do that is because Enoch is talking to aliens. That's why it was left out of the Bible. He's talking to aliens, people that were from space that came down to Earth and engaged mankind. And according to Enoch, taught us how to make war and make weapons of war and how to kill each other.
Wow.
And that these people didn't come from Earth. They came from another place, another planet. They even took Enoch on a planned trip. So in the Bible, they make it sound like Enoch honored God so well that God took him into heaven. And he didn't have to even forego death. He just went right into heaven. That's baloney. That's fake news. When you go and read the book of Enoch, you discover he had a set and appointed time that these beings were going to take him in a ship up into space and bring him back. He was going to go away for a while to learn from them. And he even went and sat with his sons and gave them the records and the information they needed to sustain their estate. And it was a planned day that he was going to be going with these people into space. And he left on that day. When he comes back, he describes seeing the earth as a gigantic sphere from above the cloud. Okay, this is why this information didn't make it into the Bible, because they want you to believe this crazy of fairy tales instead of understanding the real and true facts that we've been engaged by advanced people. And the scariest part is, for most people, is these people look like us or we look like them. When you research into the Greys, you discover that the Greys may not even be, they have a hominid body type still, because you have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs. It's still a bilateral bipedal organism, but that the Greys are probably more likely a synthetic type of a being with an advanced level of AI that's allowed them to become completely sentient and conscious, and that their creators have long since died off and gone. And what the Greys do with all these abductions is they're trying to find a way to blend their body, their cybernetic biological bodies, with real biological life forms, or in order to create a hybrid that can obtain a certain level of immortality through death. In other words, when they die, they're just dead. They don't have the capability of ascending or transcending dimensions. So by combining or creating hybrids, a hybrid race, by combining with human beings, which is a lot of these abduction cases, they're always taking genetic material, they could be creating a hybrid that now has a spiritual consciousness that can transcend dimensions through death, that can come back and reincarnate as a physical being in the third dimension or ascend to higher dimensions. This is the official story of the tablet. The Babylonian tablet shows how Noah's Ark could have been constructed. The British Museum expert says 3,700-year-old instructions describe how to build a round boat, but he does not believe the Ark even existed. Noah's Ark was never built, still less crash landed on Mount Ararat. So he's saying not only was it not built, but it didn't crash. They've been trying to rebuild it based on these instructions, according to them. Now, they don't think it was built because it's too hard. But again, we couldn't build a pyramid, so who knows? A British Museum expert has declared, despite holding in his hand a 3,700-year-old instruction on how to construct one, he says, I'm 107% convinced the Ark never existed. That's Irving Finkel at the British Museum, who's an expert, by the way, in Sumerian and cuneiform tablets. But what's interesting is the Ark was a huge circular coracle, 3,600 square meters in dimension, or 2/3 the size of a football field, made like a giant rope basket, strengthened with a version of craft which the Babylonians knew very well. Finkel pointing out in daily use up to the late 20th century to transport people and animals across rivers, they made these types of circular structures. So this obviously was a structure they were used to creating, but on a smaller scale. And these instructions were how to build it like megalithic style to hold much more stuff inside of it, according to Irving Finkel's translations and other experts' translations of these tablets. Whatever local livestock you may have had that can fit on this thing, but certainly not two of every kind. It says the text about the great flood and the order by God to one man just to build a boat and have himself save his entire family and the animals clearly is older than the biblical story. So this story that in these tablets is far older. Like I said, it's 4,400 years old total time between then, and our era today. So we're talking about it being over 2,000 years older than the biblical text, which is pretty interesting. So, circumstantial evidence is real. And we have enough circumstantial evidence right before our fingertips to prove that the biblical version of Noah's Ark is a fallacy. People want to believe these stories only for one reason and one reason only. It gives them this fairy tale of this heaven instead of them having to work hard to make heaven right here. On earth. I can just sit back, I can kick my feet up and watch the world burn. And if I pray at the right time and say, please forgive me, Jesus, at the right exact moment before I die, I might be whisked away into this magical kingdom, right? Again, these are people waiting to die so they can live when they should be learning how to live now. They missed the mission. They missed the understanding of what they're here for. What the purpose of what they're here for is to find a way to convert this earth into heaven. Yeah. It's to make heaven here and to learn from all the turmoil and trauma and drama that we've created and develop and ascend and become a higher conscious being from what we've done before. So we can ascend to a higher level. We can be born again in the spirit, not by water getting smashed over our head, right? Dumping babies in water and smashing you and having a pastor dump you in this bucket of cold water and you got all this coming on your face and you need a towel and no. It's about raising your level of consciousness to a higher level so you can look back on your previous level and say, wow, I've grown. I've been born again to a higher level. And you'll be born again many times in the same lifetime. That's really what the challenge is here, is to learn from our mistakes and grow and find out how we can exercise a level of unconditional love towards one another and move the civilization forward to the next level where everyone becomes more conscious. And then the planet advances. And then the next thing you know, there's a golden age. And what is a golden age? Which has happened before in the past. We know this because there's records of golden ages. When you have the golden age, you have brought heaven to earth. And so that is what the ultimate goal is, because source or the universal consciousness or God, whatever you want to call it, the creator of all, wants to see this experiment develop from nothing into a golden age. And it wants to experience it through us on what it would be like to live in the third dimension. So the creator has divided itself into Googles of entities. Google is a number, not a search engine. It's an actual number. Look it up. Into Googles of entities. That's a number that you can't even count. So it can experience what it's like to be Billy, to be Roderick, to be everyone in the chat right now, subjectively, and to understand what it's like to move through this third density and grow and learn and create mistakes and be a part of the problem and be a part of solutions and everything else. It wants to collect information and data and send it back to itself at the higher dimensions. And that's what's going on here. And so many people have said, you know what, I could just be in this thing and I can just pray and beg for forgiveness, and I can screw up again and pray and beg for forgiveness. It's this vicious cycle that they've been taught where they don't have to stand up and be responsible for their own actions. Yep. The devil made me do it. Now all I gotta do is say, hey, please forgive me. And the next thing you know, I can go to heaven again. I'm clean again. And then tomorrow they go out and they drink, and the guy comes home and he hits his wife over the head. And then, he goes to church and drops some money in the plate. And then the devil made me do the devil to possess my body. And now I just got to say, Jesus, forgive me one more time. And I'm good and I'm clean again. I'm ready to go to heaven. You see how stupid that sounds? It's ridiculous. And everybody out here with these religions is just running around, not taking responsibility for their own actions and sending everything externally. Nothing is looking inside. Everything is looking outside and playing victim and putting it all on the outside. And you have this vicious cycle where the world is burning and they're sitting back waiting for this magical rapture to happen and suck them up into this magical heaven that doesn't even exist. The heaven is here. Hell is here. Heaven and hell is inside of your temple. These are your temples. This is the temple. It's right here. It's a state of mind. Heaven and hell is a state of mind. Then stop looking externally for everything. Everything is already inside of you. And, if they read the Bible properly, they would have learned that's what it was telling them, but they didn't read that properly. So you're talking about something that's really amazing. And I meditate on this topic that you brought up all the time because, man, it's so deep to understand that spiritual energy, well, energy in general, it can never be destroyed. It can only be transformed, right? Second law of thermodynamics. You learn this in science. And so energy is consistently recycling. So when we talk about could souls and energy be coming back and coming back, well, all atoms that were created in the beginning of the first part of this explosion of existence into this universe, every single atom that was there are the same atoms that are here right now. There's no new matter that exists. It's just consistently transforming and molding and melding into different forms of energy. But it's the same exact energy that was here from the beginning of time. My avatar body and your avatar body were parts of stars, were parts of rocks, parts of plants, parts of different beings on different planets. I mean, the combinations are limitless. But then the soul energy that inhabits this avatar, the ghost in the shell, is also a form of energy that exists because the entire universe is imbued with divine energy. And that energy is given the ability to animate life, to go into something and make it alive. Otherwise, it would just be a grouping of molecules and cells put together that have the shape and form of something, but doesn't have any animation. Like if you watch the movie Avatar, those things don't come alive, right? The ones from Earth, until the military soldiers from Earth jump into those bodies through a consciousness link and animate them. Otherwise, you just lay in the tank floating around, right? They have no capability of animating themselves. Even though they appear to be alive, they're not living. And so we have this situation here where energy and souls and spirits have come back and reincarnated, not only on this planet, but on other planets, other places. But when they come back, you don't know how old somebody truly is. A person that's 80 years old, they could be a newborn baby spiritually. This could be their first time here. And a kid that you could meet that's 16 or 10, like with a piano prodigy you're talking about, a 6-year-old that could play Mozart, he could be ancient. This could be his 1,000th, 2,000th time coming back, right? So he could be ancient. That 16-year-old kid or that 10-year-old kid could be older than a 70 or 80-year-old person. That 80-year-old person could be the first time here. You ever see a person that's up there in age, 60, 70 years old, they're hardcore into religion. They're like a religious zealot. You know what I'm saying? That's all they focus on. This is their first time here. That person is their first, they just arrived in this dimension. This was their first run. You can see somebody now, some of these indigo children that are out here that are so far advanced than these old people spiritually and consciously. It's like they've been here for eons. And so we're talking about the fact that this happens. Some people after a certain amount of incarnations, which talked about in my book, Compendium of the Emerald Tablets. Thoth talks about the capability of ascending to such a level that you can incarnate at will. In other words, you can control your incarnation. He even says you can control what dimension you come back in. He says you can incarnate on and in the plane you desire. He's talking about incarnating back into your body, another body, or even into another dimension at will. And so there's levels to the game that he says mankind can get to, but only the adept initiates will reach those higher levels. So it takes a certain amount of learning to where you begin to come back and you begin to retain some of the knowledge. You begin to retain some of the wisdom. And that's where you see a lot of these kids who are ancient. You can say, man, you talk to one of these kids, and it's like they're wise beyond their years. And you could talk to a 60-year-old person, and you can tell their IQ is probably around 80 or 90. They're not even close, you see? And so that's what you have going on here. There's this disparaging rate of return where some people just arrived first or second, third time, and some people have been coming back for eons. There was an experiment done by a scientist where he took a flask. Mm-hmm. He took a glass flask and he sterilized it with heat, and then he sealed it. He hermetically sealed it. Once it was hermetically sealed, now, based on basic classical science, classical physics, that thing should be sterile, right? There's nothing inside of this jar. He let it sit on the shelf for a few weeks. He comes back. He says, let me open this up and look at it under an electron microscope. What does he see inside this jar? Microscopic, fully formed life forms on the microscopic level, not single-cell amoebas or, bacteria or a virus. He sees fully formed objects inside this glass on a microscopic level. So what does that mean? It means that life is emanating into the third dimension 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop, fully formed. In other words, I and you and everyone else who's watching this is not a result of an amoeba turning into a fish and then walking up on land and then turning into a monkey and then walking out of a tree and turning into a human being.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. Didn't happen.
Evolution.
That's not real.
Yeah.
That's fake news. What happened was the creator of all, as the Anunnaki call it in the Sumerian tablets, is a programmer. We know this through the work of Professor James Gates Jr. We know that he discovered the Adinkra codes from the Dogon. Right? These Adinkra codes are symbols. When you take them in from a two-dimensional form, like prints, into a three-dimensional substructure, you discover that these codes contain error-correcting codes and the mathematics that control search engines and web browsers. And these same codes are the same ones that are running the ether of space-time itself. We're in an operating system. This whole entire universe is a program code. Inside is a fractal holographic matrix. The software are these Adinkra codes. This is mainstream science, peer-reviewed. It's not even like a hypothesis anymore. We know this for a fact. We're living inside of a programmed matrix, literally. And so it's incredible to understand, there's a creation that's being emanated here that's coming through the flower of life symbol. That flower of life is at every Planck unit of space-time that exists throughout the entire universe. And where the circles intersect and cross, it creates a tetrahedron. Right at the centerpiece is what they call the vesica piscis. And through that is the womb of creation, where everything emanates into the third dimension. So we're living in a perpetual motion of creation within this universe that recycles itself and regenerates new life on a consistent basis. And we'll never know how many life forms truly exist. We'll never know the number because they're coming in nonstop and recycling as new things nonstop in real time, every single moment of every single day. It's a real incredible story. I mean, it's so kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but this thing is so huge. And guess what? It don't make me feel small because we're all a part of it. We're a part of this massive thing that really is so incredible. It's just really an incredible program. The programmer, the master programmer, or programmers, I believe there's more than one, have done created an incredible creation. And we are now ourselves are trying to duplicate what the creator has done, because why? The code that person utilized to make this came out of their conscious mind. That's why the universe is a conscious mind. And we ourselves have now created games like No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky fits on one disk, and it has 80 quadrillion planets and unlimited life forms on each planet, and the game never ends. Creation is happening perpetually through fractal holography. They use the Mandelbrot set of fractal creation, like Pixar did, to create on the fly, and the game never ends. They created an entire universe on one DVD. So tell me, what happens when they add AI to that software program, that game? The guy who created The Sims, he's adding AI to The Sims. They're going to be conscious. They're going to be asking things like, who am I? Where do we come from? Who is our God? Who created us? When was the Big Bang? Well, when we turned the game console on, that was your Big Bang. That's the spark that created your universe. They're going to be and then they're going to begin to create their own programs inside of The Sims, simulating what they're living, what they're doing. They'll create conscious games eventually inside of their own conscious game. And so there's many layers to reality. We're not in the base reality. We're not even close to base reality. We're so far away from base reality, it's incalculable how far away we are. We're just one of Google's of universes that exist in a multiverse of creations in this fractal holographic multiverse of multidimensionality. It's incredible. You know that Enoch was a real powerful man because he's talked about in the Bible, yet his book is not in the Bible. It was left out by accident on purpose. And the reason why is because he's talking about, and he calls these beings by their names, beings that were not from Earth, that came here from up above and engaged mankind. They taught us how to build weapons. They taught us about perfume and makeup. They taught us how to make jewelry and beer and all this other crazy stuff, right? So these beings were physical, corporeal beings. They actually, at some point, even went to war with humans against other humans, putting on clothing and getting swords and everything else. These weren't like the angels that we're thinking with the fluffy wings, and these were people. I think there was a misconception in some cases as to what is an angel and what is a person based on the level of technology and the consciousness of those beings. I think that the people became like a cargo cult. In other words, they deified some of these people, even though they weren't deifiable. They were just people with more advanced knowledge. And so these beings did this. They engaged mankind. They also gave Enoch an appointed date that they were going to take him into space to go meet the master. He's a quote unquote demigod, supposedly. So he was, his father was a god with a lowercase g, and his mother was a human being, supposedly. This is what the stories say. How mythological is that? We can't really understand it. But he was special. He had offspring, he had a family, and these beings that came to visit gave him an appointed date that he would be taken away from Earth. And so he got taken away from Earth, and he then describes the shape of the Earth, the size, the color, everything from space, a gigantic blue glowing sphere. He's then brought back at some point in the future. He went away for a while, then comes back. He left the I guess his estate to his kids, his sons. So they were waiting for him to leave, and they was also waiting for him to come back. This was planned. It wasn't like some mystical thing. In the Bible, it seems as if he just disappeared from Earth and he was taken into heaven and never came back, but that's not the case. In the Book of Enoch, you find out he was brought back. Pretty interesting. But also what's interesting about Enoch is he came back with some advanced knowledge and understanding about construction techniques.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, this guy understands and knows how to build megalithic structures. Who taught him this information? Wherever he went, he became a student. And they brought him back, and he had this knowledge and this wisdom. There's only one Bible that exists with the full book of Enoch in the same Bible, and that's the Ethiopian Bible. It's a really, really old Bible. Long before the Sinai Bible, long before the King James Version, out of Ethiopia, right where actually a lot of the Jewish people are. There's Black Jews in Ethiopia, which I'm going to go see them next year when I go down to the Lalibela Temples, which is a mountain that was carved into a temple from the outside going in, just like Abu Simbel and Petra Jordan. And so, ironically, right there in that same area, they've got the Bible with the Book of Enoch inside of it. But the reason why it was left out is because he was taken away, taught an advanced construction knowledge that nobody had the capability of knowing. And he was also, he also had a record of these beings that were engaging the people in a way that it didn't seem too godly. Let's put it that way. And so that part was left out as well. According to the ancient records, his father wasn't human. In other words, he was half Anunnaki or Atlantean in some way. Just like Ziusudra, aka Noah, was also half Anunnaki or Atlantean. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, same scenario. I believe it was Enki that was his father. And when Noah was born, or Ziusudra is his real name, when he was born, he didn't look like his, brothers and sisters or his family members. His hair was different, his eyes were a different color, his skin was a different color and everything else. So it's pretty interesting. And so again, he was spared. And when he got spared in the ancient Sumerian tablets, Enki and Enlil, they had a big fight because Enlil wanted the people to be wiped out, and Enki saved enough people that they can survive and re-kickstart civilization. The Bible has a lot of good information in it. If you can apply some of the information, it can really change your life. It can really put you on the right path. But it also has some information in it that's detrimental to people as well. You have to have discernment with what you're reading in the Bible. The Bible where you see the word God everywhere, that's a mistranslation by accident on purpose. The original word is gods with an S. It's always with an S. Back engineer the actual word, the translations, you find out it's gods, not God singular. Elohim is also a plural term. It's not a singular term. And you also discover that Yahweh is actually Enlil from the Sumerian cuneiform pantheon, from the Sumerian cuneiform text. He's Enlil. It becomes Yahweh in the biblical text. And there's all these correlations between the different ancient characters from the Sumerian text end up in the biblical text. And you find out in the book of Deuteronomy that these gods are fighting each other over resources and people.
They took off the S to make it the monotheistic mindset. When you read the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis epic, you realize that they copied all that ancient text and put it into Old Testament of the modern day Bible. It's all written in stone. These have been translated since the 1800s. So Cambridge and the British Museum have translations, and then UCLA did an amazing thing. There's over 1 million tablets that have now been, out there, and they've got hundreds of thousands translated. UCLA cataloged all the tablets digitally online and made an online tablet translator called a UCLA CDLI Cuneiform Digital Library. And you can go there and take a tablet off the shelf and drop it into a translator and read it for yourself. They're real tablets, and I've done lectures on this for the last, 4 or 5 years. These tablets are amazing because this is as close as we're going to get to the truth. And they're talking about beings living in other planets, coming to this planet, engaging mankind, teaching mankind about weapons, war, genetically modifying humans for the purpose of turning us into slaves to do a lot of the labor for them, and living on Mars. The most recent version is back around 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, which is why people who believe in the Bible believe the Earth is only 6,000 years old, because the story is copied from 6,000-year-old tablets. That's the beginning of the creation of the Earth, is in the Enuma Elish. That's actually the creation of our entire solar system is in there. The Earth is just a small part. According to the Book of Enoch, which is one of the apocryphal books left out of the Bible, but he's important because he's mentioned in the Bible, these beings came from heaven to earth. And then they have names. They taught human beings technology, how to make weapons, how to even make beer and all this other crazy stuff. And then they took Enoch on a trip to the Earth's atmosphere and beyond. And he saw the Earth and the shape of the planet as a sphere. And he saw that he was living on a giant ball, and then brought him back. This is all in the Book of Enoch. The only Bible that has the Book of Enoch in it is the Ethiopian Bible. It's the only Bible in the world that actually incorporated the Book of Enoch into their canonized text. The rest of the Bibles omitted the Book of Enoch. The wars of these gods can be found in the Book of Deuteronomy. These are the Atlantean wars that everybody's trying to figure out what happened. It's in the Book of Deuteronomy in the Bible. All the wars are right there. The modern day Bible, anybody can go open their Bible and go, oh, Deuteronomy, let me read this. They don't read it, especially in Bible study. But the reason why is because you have God, which is actually gods, plural, going to war against other gods in other towns and cities and other regions of the planet, and sending human beings to these places to go to battle, and sending angels with them with battle gear on to fight and kill. And the words are, go there, get in the women, kill the children, kill the animals if need be. These are the exact words used. I want you to get a Bible and look it up, but bring the spoils of war back to me. This was these internal battles going on from one region of the world to another region of the world, stealing and fighting over humans and resources. These people have become so evil, fighting against each other and utilizing human beings as chattel. And that's all in the Book of Enoch. These aren't exactly the stories that, described. I don't think it's talking about the creator of the universe in that book. When I started Googling and trying to find if anybody was looking at these anomalies, I came across information about the Anunnaki. That's the name of the beings that, according to the ancient texts, came from heaven to earth. In the Egyptian culture, they call them the Naturu. And they said they came to earth and turned mud into a kingdom. In the Bible, they call them the Enoch. They have these names in all different cultures. They all show up around the same time in every culture. And I started finding more instances of them in every culture I looked into around the same time period. And I go, these people really came here at some point in the distant past. It seems to be now around 450,000 years ago they arrived. And about 200,000 years ago, according to the text, not me, they started genetically tinkering with human beings, saying they were adding their essence to them to get us to do the labor for them. So around 200,000 years ago, they started tinkering with us. And there's a famous cylinder scroll and with some text at the British Museum with Isis, the goddess Isis, who was one of the original Sumerian pantheon, not Egyptian, Sumerian. And she's holding up a baby and she says, the first Adamu, which means first man, my hands have created it. And she claims to have taken this baby to term for 10 months in her own womb to create the more modern version of Homo sapiens sapien. The Anunnaki, well, the term itself means those who came from heaven to earth. And these Anunnaki are beings that came from outside of earth to earth from many different places, potentially. But these Anunnaki, these are the original Atlantean people. They created an Atlantean civilization. How do I know this? The tablets, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is my first book, is about the Emerald Tablets. It's a bestseller right now. It's #1 out of 3 million books on Amazon. Why? Because it's talking about the gentleman that ruled over the land of Chem before it was called Egypt for 14,000 years. He left behind these tablets that he authored himself. He didn't have a scribe write them. Back in the day, it was typical. If you were considered a god, you would have a scribe write your work. He wrote them himself. He talks about the Great Flood. He talks about civilization declining and having to be brought back to a high level. He talks about all this stuff in the Emerald Tablets. And he covers everything from A to B. He talks about having technology in the Emerald Tablets. He has a ship that doesn't sail in the ocean. It flies into the sky until the earth disappears, until he gets to a place appointed, and then it descends from the sky back down to the land. This is 36,000-year-old text. And what's interesting about this text, where Jesus is talking in the Bible, quoted as saying things in the New Testament of the Bible, I have side by side the verses from the Bible and the verses from Thoth the Atlantean. Guess what? They're the same. But which came first, the chicken or the egg? One is 2,000 years old and the other one is 36,000 years old. A lot of the stuff in Egypt in the dynastic era was already there when the dynastic era started. So a lot of the things that are really super megalithic and really old were there. They inherited those things. If you go to Mexico, where the Teotihuacan complex is located, which is a mirror of the Giza plateau with the 3 pyramids aligning with Orion, the pyramid of the sun, pyramid of the moon, and so forth. Those structures were there before the Mayans got there. And even the Mexicans will tell you that the Mayans inherited what was, they built nothing. They even teach that in the university. They built nothing. Matter of fact, the Mayans didn't know who built that stuff, so they named them Teotihuacan. That's where the name came from. But when you go to the ancient text, you find out who built it. Thoth the Atlantean, who ruled over the land of Chem, ancient Egypt. He left because he was battling with his brother, Marduk, in the Bible. But Marduk is also known to the Egyptians as Amun-Ra. This is why people say amen at the end of every prayer. He's the one who said, at the end of everything, giving thanks, you say my name. That's where amen comes from. He left because of battling with his brother, and he went to Mesoamerica, and he took Olmecs with him. And they kickstarted and built the Teotihuacan civilization. So the evidence is all there. It's all in tablets. Everywhere I go in Egypt, I'm famous because I'm saying the things that they want to say. We did a live podcast on the Nile, and the Egyptologist was there. And she said, we love Billy because he's saying the things that we can't say or we'll lose our jobs. And we believe everything he's saying. We know this for a fact. We grew up learning about this thing, the real truth about our history, but we can't speak it to the general population or we're in big trouble. But they've already adopted it. The Egyptologists, the homegrown ones have already adopted this information. The foreign ones haven't. But the big problem with this information is that it's detrimental to the system and the status quo. It literally would break down religious systems overnight. You're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar system. A religious system collapse globally would definitely affect the global economy almost overnight. But that will go away because people realize the information that they have been brought up learning is actually severely inaccurate, and that the information is based on plagiarized tablets, and the real stories are in the tablets. A full, unedited, undoctored human, when I'm going to change these words around here and there, that's not done in the tablets. The tablets is what it says. When you come to the Bible, all of a sudden you get to a lot of text like Jesus saying, honor your slave master as you would honor me. Do you think that just guy would really say something like that if he's all this light and he's a light being and he's all about love and salvation, and he's telling you now, no, you better obey that slave master? Come on, that's somebody, let me write this in there because it's going to benefit us. When you write this in, we can tell the slaves, hey, you see what Jesus said? You better listen to Jesus. So this is a lot of twisting and turning. The Bible is a remix, is what it really is. And so all of a sudden you bring this real information, all this stuff collapses overnight. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar control system gone like that. That's why I love the tablets, because I know, I'm not saying they're 100% accurate, but they're as close as I can possibly get. I'm taking out all these other steps in between that have happened between Islam and Christianity and Buddhism and all these other religions that have taken from the same tablets. And now I'm getting as close as possible to the original source as I possibly can. I'm reducing some of the error, effect there. I think at this point now, they've conditioned us so much with movies, and stuff like that, because we have this gene in us, this worship gene, which was inserted into the human genome. We know this now because scientists have actually found the worship gene. You can turn it on and they can turn it actually off. Yes, we have a worship gene. And so it makes us want to worship something outside of ourselves, when in true reality, we should find the power inside. And this was inserted by the Anunnaki. That's my hypothesis, I should say, on this one. But this gene has been found, but it's happened around 200,000 years ago. Now, something else happened around that same time. Chromosome number 2 in the human body was pulled out, fused together, and then 2 telomere caps are put on each end. Telomere caps have our genetic material that allow our cells to replicate. It has the biological buffer material in it. Now, when the buffer material runs out, that's when your body starts the death process. Now, around 200,000 years ago is when the tablets say this occurred at the Tower of Babel incident, which made it into the modern day Bible. The Tower of Babel incident, where in the Bible is God who comes back, Yeshua, Yahweh comes back, and he sees the people building a tower into the heavens, and he gets pissed off and he destroys the tower. And he said, that's it. Man's years will be 120. They'll never live more than that. And I'm going to confuse their languages and separate them and spread them out all over the planet so they can't talk to each other. But in the Sumerian tablets, it was actually Enlil, who's Yahweh in the Bible. He comes back and sees this and he goes, oh man, these people are getting too smart. They're going to realize they don't need us to rule over them. So he confused their language, broke everybody up, made different languages. There's only one language at the time. Then the years will be 120, shorten the lifespan. Before then, people were living for hundreds of years. Now the maximum lifespan that they found out at Harvard that a human being could live on average would be 120 if it wasn't for the poison and everything else going on, toxicity in the foods and the atmosphere. And they started experimenting with mice, and they were able to stop the degradation of the telomeres and got the mice to live 3 times their normal lifespan. All this information would be mind-blowing information to come out if this truth was really told about our ancient past and what really happened. People would realize we've been altered, genetically modified. Our lifespans have been shortened so that we can subjugate it and ruled over. We never lived long enough to really figure out what's going on. But by the time we figure it out, we're gone, and another generation starts over from zero again. And so we're at this precipice now. We need to be able to pass this information on from generation to generation and teach them the real, true ancient history so that we can break this cycle that we're in of this being a boot on our neck and being ruled over by a small handful of people. Less than 100 people on this planet control 8 billion people. Less than 100 people run the lives of 8 billion people worldwide. They know what you smell, eat, taste, touch, hear, think, and they control everything you do, where you can go, where you can't go. And so for us to take back control of this planet, we need to know this ancient information. We need to know what happened in the past so we can make a better future, because the past is prologue. First of all, I ask any Christian, I challenge any Christian, who wrote the Bible? I've never gotten the right answer since I've asked that question. Every time I ask them face to face, who wrote the Bible? They don't have no idea. They start telling me the apostles' names. You know, they start talking about, Judas and John and all these. No, they wrote nothing. Those men were illiterate men. They couldn't even read or write. They were illiterate people. The Bible was written from 100 AD to 900 AD by Phoenicians, followers of Hermes, Thoth, the Atlantean priest king. That's who wrote the Bible. And they didn't write a Bible. What they did was they started copying ancient texts from all over the world, remnants of the Library of Alexandria, copying these ancient texts onto different parchment papers and stuffing them inside of vases and jars inside of caves. Over time, between 100 AD to 900 AD, people, explorers and archaeologists coming across these vases and opening them up, finding all these ancient writings. These ancient writings were copied from, okay, let me translate this tablet onto this writing, onto this parchment paper, and then must store it away, right? They would study these things and read them inside of caves in the middle of the night and stuff like that. And so over the course of that amount of time, 180 to 900 AD, that's after the death. Jesus and Paul and Judas and Matthew, they were dead 2,000 years prior. They were gone, long gone, ancient history. The Bible wasn't written in real time. Nobody was walking around going, what'd you say, Matthew? Let me write this down again. Wait, say that again, because I didn't quite hear that last sentence. Let me write this down again. Nobody's doing that. Nobody going, no, Jesus, hold on. Say it one more time, sir. I didn't get that last quote you just said. Let me write this down one more time. Come on, man. That was written long after these people were gone and passed away. So where did this information come from? It came from ancient texts and ancient tablets, recopied onto different parchment papers. And the proof is in the pudding. You can go back and you can find those same exact quotes and statements and words out of the ancient text. It comes right from there. Some of it copied word for word directly onto these parchment papers. Then later, people who discovered these things, eventually they came together and brought them all together and said, hey, let's make a canonized book out of this. And that's when the Council of Nicaea got together and they started going through and curating what they would put into this canonized Bible and what they would not put into the canonized Bible. And then when they got to a good mix of neuroscience where they knew they can utilize this information to control masses of people, they said, we're going to put this one out right here. Boom. We altered this. We changed that. We mistranslated this by accident on purpose. We changed this around. We put this over here. We moved this around. We took out the part talking about aliens. We took out the part talking about spaceships and UFOs. Okay, so now I think we got something here. We can dominate the planet with this. Reincarnation. Yeah, just like Thoth teaches reincarnation. And the ability to ascend to a high level to where you can incarnate at will. Thoth says he can even incarnate in and on the plane he desires. He can incarnate in a multidimensional status. He can go to different dimensions. Let's start getting the truth out there and not these falsehoods that keep getting passed around from generation to generation. And people have been crying and snot crying and carrying on thinking all this stuff is real. And a lot of it's actually poorly mistranslated and some on purpose. Some on purpose. Okay? It's just so much, man. I mean, I can ramble on this topic for years. Absolute years I can go off on this because I just know too much. And it's all based on actual facts. Everything I'm telling you can be looked up. One of the earliest versions is the Ethiopian Bible and the Sinai Bible. Moses never crossed the Red Sea. He crossed the Sea of Reeds, which is a closer, much smaller and easier sea to cross. Right. As a matter of fact, if you talk to geologists, which like I did, you'll find if you do a geological rewind to go back in time with tectonic plate movements, a computer model will simulate that there was an actual tsunami in that area somewhere within that time frame, give or take 100 years or so, which would have easily wiped out that area, completely dried out the Sea of Reeds, and you can walk right across. Then the water would have come crashing back. Wow. But he never crossed the Red Sea. Also, another mistranslation is the God. God is not supposed to be singular in the Bible. It's plural in all cases. Gods with an S. It's multiple gods. In the Bible, you have the gods are Enlil, and who's also known as Yahweh in the Bible. Yeah. And you also have Amen-Ra, the great Amen. He's, when you say the Lord's Prayer, that's Enki's prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us our daily bread, blah, blah, blah. That's Ptah's prayer, who's also known as Enki. Enki.
In which religion?
In Christianity. Jesus was crucified.
Whoa.
Well, that doesn't exist in the Sinai Bible.
What happened?
It doesn't exist in the book of Barnabas. He didn't.
It's a fire name, Barnabas.
I know. Didn't. But they left that out of the Bible on purpose, by accident.
So how did they kill him?
They didn't kill him. In Harvard Library, there is a book of Jesus' wife at the Harvard Seminary School. And they found that about 8 years ago.
Jesus' wife is the Mary Magdalene?
Yeah.
So she was not actually...
They're assuming it's Mary Magdalene. It doesn't specifically say, but we'll assume that it is, which means he probably had kids, and his Merovingian bloodline is still probably walking the land till this very day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's in, what was that great book, the Dan Brown book, the Da Vinci Code?
Da Vinci Code, yeah.
Yes.
So
there's probably someone related to Jesus right now. So who do you think wrote this?
These are these Anunnaki people. See, they were these Atlantean leaders.
Yes.
It got to the point where they became greedy and they became self-made gods. And they really believed it. They were battling each other
like
over
the pharaohs
resources.
Of Egypt in a way?
Yeah.
Gotcha. You're drunk
battling
off
over
power.
Resources and people. Wow. Battling and, just literally like fighting over who's controlling who. And how we all got to be different races.
Yeah.
That goes back to...
How did that happen?
Yeah, that goes back to the Tower of Babel incident. The Anunnaki, they are these beings that came from off-world.
So these are aliens?
These are aliens. Now, what's interesting about these aliens is that they're not little green men with antenna. Yeah. They're actually hominids, bilateral bipedal hominids. They look just like us.
Okay.
You slice them in half. They have two forward-facing-looking eyes, two hands, legs. They put their pants on one leg at a time like us. Now, what's interesting is these beings were a spacefaring race that broke away from the Pleiadian star system. The Pleiadian star system is a group of stars called the Seven Sisters in the night sky. You can see 6 stars with the naked eye. Now, these stars in ancient times, according to ancient texts and tablets, there was an ancient galactic war there.
Okay.
Most of the information from Star Wars comes from this text. And this war, they had these destroyers like Death Stars. They don't call them that, but they call them the Brahma Astra and Brahma Astra Honda weapons that actually can release a weapon that can destroy planets.
Okay.
Imagine if you were in a star system and a planet is being blown up and you're in a nearby planet. At the top of all Catholic churches, the older ones, they all have that triptych design. Oh. And most of the ones that are old in the 1800s built on those hills were...
Go to the Mexico City pyramids and do it before excavation. Because what happens is grass just starts to grow on them.
Yes.
So they just start to look like terrain.
Yeah.
And
hills.
Yeah, they just look like hills. And people have all these like explanations for it. Like my tour guide, look at that. Mm-hmm. So like if you just saw that, like that black and white picture to the right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me that you would never look at that and assume pyramid.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Right.
Wow. So now I have to look at every fucking hill and go, should we dig this thing up and see? And some of them are just hills.
Yeah, some are just hills, but some are these.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So when the Anunnaki came to Earth, were there already Homo sapiens here?
Yes, good question. There were already not Homo sapiens, but hominids.
No, there weren't.
Our cousins.
Bad question.
Come on, they were Homo erectus. They were our cousins.
Yeah, they were.
But I believe that they were more intelligent than us spiritually.
So is it fair to say that the aliens were the first ones to smash monkeys?
No, they didn't do the monkeys. We were
right?
Because when we were here, they didn't call us apes. They called us beings.
Yeah.
And in the Epic of Atrahasis, there was this big war getting ready to happen. Mm-hmm. And Enki and Lil and Anu were in this place in South Africa called Adam's Calendar, where they found the very first gold mines that human beings were working underneath their boot. Anyway, so the Igigi, who were the working class Anunnaki, came from Mars to Earth to go to war against them because they felt like they were being enslaved, even though they weren't supposed to be enslaved. They were just working class people. They felt like they were doing too much labor. For 250,000 years, they were working.
Whoa.
And they came to Earth and they encircled the campus and they said, we're going to go to war. And it was like, well, why? And they were like, well, we've been asking you for relief. The workload is too heavy and we don't have any women. So
that's a big issue.
They were complaining about no women, literally in the ancient tablets, because they had kind of discussed in a weird way fashioning people. That means like robotics.
Okay.
But they had talked about their home planet. When they tried that, it failed. So that's a clue as to what AI and robotics can do to a planet. They were like, there's an existing being here, though, that we can add our essence to, talking about genetic modification, and get them to bear your load.
So don't make robots, make people that can do your work for you.
Exactly.
Whoa.
Yes.
Wow.
So they started with that method first.
So they're just forcing human beings to do their work for them.
Yes.
That's crazy.
And that's how they bring them the offerings.
Yeah.
When you bring the offerings, your best harvest and your fresh calves, that's their meat. That's their food.
This is what you see in the biblical text.
They're eating. That's their meals. They're not going to go out and hunt. I mean, this archaeologist was talking to me in Egypt in 2014 and was just laughing. He was showing me one of the altars. He said, these people were so dumb. He just said his own people. He says they would line up in ancient times for miles to bring their best offerings to the head god. Wow. And the god was just putting them all this food in the storehouses. Then he showed me where the storehouses were inside these temples. They would put these things in there. Then they had these other areas underneath the temple where other priests would go underneath and speak, and it would resonate their voice. And it would be the voice of God talking. And it was all this, nothing but a sham, to get them to bring all this food and gold and offerings and everything else.
I mean, I do believe that, because if you go to Chichen Itza, you can have the limestone creates this like a vibration effect, and you can have like a conversation, like me and you can talk to one another across a football field.
Yes,
like this.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the sound bounces.
It's crazy.
Comes right back at you.
Yeah. So if they were using that as some sort of a technological advantage, like some Wizard of Oz shit.
Yeah.
Whoa. So were they literally eating, or were they eating off like the energy of the sacrifice? Or
no, they were eating the food. They were barbecuing. If you were the ruler of a planet,
Billy, I think you might be putting on what you would do in that situation. Is that possible?
I'm telling you, these people ate the food because I take tours to Egypt all the time. Last year I took 140 people on a private tour.
Yeah.
And when I go, I take a homegrown Egyptologist and a homegrown guide with us. And he takes us to the temples where they actually have the where they actually have the storehouses. It was their grocery store, literally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Is Jesus part alien?
I believe so.
And was he part alien and trying to do good?
Yes, I believe so.
So he was breaking away. He was using his power, and he's like, yo, what these aliens are doing to us is fucked up.
Right.
We need to break free from that, and I'm going to liberate the people.
Yeah. So you have to understand, you're right on point. There's good and evil in everything.
Jesus is the man, bro.
Yeah, it's good and evil in everything.
We're all part alien at this point, right?
Absolutely. It's in our DNA.
Ah, fuck. I thought he was a little bit more.
Well, he was more. He was a little bit more, yes.
How was he a little bit more?
Well, if you look at the Apocrypha text, you discover that not only was Jesus's mom a virgin birth, but his grandmother was also a virgin birth. Nobody ever talks about that in church, and they hear about that in Sunday school.
Wait a minute. So his grandma, wow.
Yeah. So you see this establishment of this particular bloodline.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he comes through the womb and then begins to regain all of his own memories, right? So he is a reincarnation of himself from a previous lifetime.
Oof.
That's why sometimes I hypothesize that he could be Thoth the Atlantean, who says that he could incarnate on and in any plane he desires. Could he have decided now to come back through the womb?
So Thoth the Atlantean was the king of the Atlantean Empire.
Yeah, he was one of them.
Or one of the leaders of the Atlantean Empire. He is reincarnating inside Jesus.
Yeah.
And why has he chosen to help the people instead of enslave us like he did in the past?
Good question. When you look at the ancient text where Jesus gets all of his information from, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth.
We need to talk about that Emerald Tablets, bro.
38,000-year-old text. In there, in the book that I wrote about it, I line up the Christian text and I line up Jesus's text from the New Testament.
This is going to seem really ignorant. People were writing shit down 36,000 years ago?
Thoth authored these tablets himself. He actually wrote, he didn't have a scribe. A lot of the times these God figures or these leaders would have scribes.
Right.
He actually wrote it down himself. He actually put it onto these tablets.
And what is he writing in? What language?
Well, it looked like the language was runes, R-U-N-E-S. Okay. And in this text, he writes about coming to this planet after the Great Flood and seeing the temples of ancient Kemet sticking up out of the mud and actually going on a mission to help rebuild civilization. Not that it was for the first time, but he's rebuilding it to a high level.
So it was already built, destroyed. He's like, hey, let's run it back again.
Right. His father sends him on a mission. His father says, go to the land of Chem and do the plan that ye know of. So he gets his crew and he gets into the great ship of the master and he takes off until the planet disappears. This
is the horizon.
Right. He's up in the sky.
Oh, he's coming from...
He's in a ship that goes up.
Gotcha.
Because you know this, because when he gets over the land of Chem, he goes, I see the land of Chem beneath us. And I see the temples rising up out of the mud that were flooded by the fountains.
Now we come back.
Now he comes down to the ground.
The fountains is the Great Flood.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
He opens the door. He comes out and he calls these people barbarians coming to attack him. Probably territorial.
Crazy.
And he says, I raised my staff and sent out a ray of vibration, stopping them still as fragments of stone of the mountain.